Donald Trump is a baby. He is a child. And I mean that because he wants to have planes and tanks and a big military parade to celebrate the 4th of July. He is going to literally take money away from the National Park Service in order to make this happen. And I'm gonna give you the figure once we watch this video.
We're gonna have a great 4th of July in Washington, D.C. It'll be like no other, it'll be special, and I hope a lot of people come, and it's gonna be about this country, and it's a salute to America. And I'm gonna be here, and I'm gonna say a few words, and we're gonna have planes going overhead, the best fighter jets in the world, and other planes too. And we're gonna have some tanks stationed outside. Gotta be pretty careful with the tanks because the roads have a tendency not to like to carry heavy tanks, so we have to put them in certain areas. But we have the brand new Sherman tanks, so we have the brand new Abram tanks, and we have some incredible equipment, military equipment on display, brand new. And we're very proud of it. You know, we're making a lot of new tanks.
So
thanks very much.
No, he's any day now. He's going to say stuff like that. Sorry, Annie, just one quick thing to add to that. When they were redesigning Air Force One, Trump's big contribution was he changed the colors. And he was so proud of that. He's like, oh no, I spent a lot of time on it. And I decided instead of just going blue and white, why don't we go blue, red, and white? And then somebody went on air and was talking about like how the deliberations for Air Force One and stuff. And they're like, it was like a kid playing with a Lego set. And he was so excited. And it is, he's like emotionally and mentally stunted. He just stopped growing mentally at, I don't know what the age is, 11, 8, I don't know what the number is. And I feel bad insulting 11-year-olds and 8-year-olds. But he's like, oh, I gotta have tanks. I'm gonna have tanks. I'm gonna move the tanks, and we're gonna have planes. Oh, and I made the colors for the planes. It was red, white, and blue. That's so smart. Get it like the flag.
I remember.
And we're having a conversation with this guy, like as if he's like a legitimate statesman, right? When he's a child.
I remember when Trump Airlines, it didn't make it, as we all know, right? One of his many business failures. One of the problems was that he wanted to like design the planes. I mean, he had to renovate them because they were older planes with like marble bathrooms and basically features that would make the plane too heavy. And it made no sense at all. But that's the kind of person he is. He's a child. Hold on, I got to give you the details on. He mentioned the roads, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna have the tanks, and the roads are gonna be in trouble because of the because they're civilian roads. They're not set up for military parades and tanks, and so they are going to damage the roads. That's one of the many concerns that have come up as a result of this parade. And this parade is not to celebrate America. That is not the purpose of the parade. The purpose of the parade is to, give something to this self-indulgent child, but more importantly, it's a campaign event. Like, he is treating this as a campaign event. His top donors will be front and center.
That's
okay.
why.
So that's one other thing to consider, and it is gonna cost us a lot of money. So one of the things that the Trump administration is doing to pay for this is taking money away from the National Park Service. They're reportedly diverting nearly $2.5 million originally intended for parks across the country for this so-called celebration/campaign event.
So Ron, you looked up the weather, didn't you, on this? Well, I was busy on Twitter right before I came out here. My dear friend Paul Rykov founded Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. No veterans are invited to this 4th of July celebration.
That's incredible.
Only lobbyists and donors.
It's amazing.
No veterans, because why would you want to invite somebody who fought and bled for our independence to an independence celebration?
Yeah. And then Ron was telling me before we got started that it's apparently literally going to rain on his parade. So I can't wait for the thunderstorms because he's gonna get spooked.
It was fake news.
Yeah.
There was no rain. It was the most beautiful sun. It was the biggest sun. It was the strongest sun.
It was a sun surrounded by the universe. Okay, he actually probably doesn't even know that. But look, the fish rots from the head down, right? So incompetence follows him everywhere he goes, and there's a reason for that, by the way. There's a logical reason why he hires incompetent people, because he values loyalty like a mob boss over competence. And so if you're trying to cover things up, it's much more important to your well-being that your guys are loyal to you than that they're good at things. So I'm kind of worried one of the tanks is gonna go off. Like, is there like a 0% chance? Well, under normal circumstances in America, well, we wouldn't have tanks in the streets, so there'd be a 0% chance. But even so, if there was, everybody be really careful, etc. The fish rots from the head down. Are you positive that something isn't going to go wrong in this insane celebration that he's doing?
I couldn't help but think about all the other issues that need to be funded in the country that are not being funded. Instead, we're using money for nonsense, the border wall that Trump still hasn't actually constructed. And this, I mean, there are people in America dying because they don't have health care right now. There are students, I mean, there are people right now who are drowning in so much debt that they are taking their own lives. Like suicide is up in America because people feel helpless.
Actually, especially among veterans. So
good point.
Yeah, another veteran, Richard Ojeda, a friend of the show, and ran down in West Virginia. And we put up a lot of his videos actually on Facebook.com/RebelHQ. And he was recently talking about a friend of his who committed suicide. And so it's really hard for veterans out there. And instead of doing the hard work of helping them, or the 9/11 responders, as you saw recently in Congress, the little boy wants to play with his toys. It's literally Donald Joffrey Baratheon, and he reminds me so much of that character. That it's, and remember, if you Game of Thrones, Joffrey also liked to play with weapons, crossbows, etc., and liked to make impetuous decisions, etc. It's amazing the similarities.
It's a show, though. I mean, the really sick, twisted departure. I mean, everything about his being, every position he takes is a departure, because going back to that 8 or 11-year-old kid, something in there made him realize that the only attention he was going to get was negative. And he's really, really good at turning everything on its head. So if America has too much sophistication, it's garish. For this country, who is far and away the greatest power on the face of the earth, to actually parade its power.
Right.
We don't do that. And that's kind of representative of this patriotism that he's bastardizing, that it's so one-dimensional and it's so anti what we are. So the essence of the country is being fought for by two different forces, and that's his playbook, is to make sure that there are two forces, not one. There's no e pluribus unum. It's like, how can I get you to hate you, so that you have to depend on me for your well-being? Yeah, and it's working.
Yeah, it is working.
It's a great point, Ron, because North Korea does a lot of military parades. Why? Because they're insecure. They are a small country and they're worried that they're not a superpower, et cetera. And so they're like, oh yeah, look at our tanks and our missiles, et cetera. Now, we're the largest military power that the world has ever seen. We don't need to do that. But Trump himself personally is insecure.
Right, yeah.
And so that's why he does it. Obama didn't need to do it. Even Bush and Clinton, et cetera, they didn't need to do it. But Trump feels like, well, I got to prove something. I got to prove something. Because he could never prove it to his daddy or whatever, when he got emotionally and mentally stunted at a young age and stopped growing. And that insecurity has never left him.
I mean, a lot of terrible decisions have been made by presidents through their own personal insecurities. I mean, invading Iraq is part of it, right?
Well, that's a great point too, and you shouldn't let Bush off the hook there, because Trump's doing a stupid parade. It's actually one of the smaller problems that Trump has. But Bush invaded Iraq. That was an actual military parade that was a million times worse, because literally a million innocent civilians lost their lives, let alone all of our troops that Rykov and Ojeda and so many others talk about. And so now there's this romanticism about George W. Bush in the press. Don't romanticize him. He was a terrible guy who made terrible decisions, and partly out of insecurity because he wanted to do what his daddy, in his mind, what his daddy couldn't do.
The problem with that analogy, though, is that Bush never made any of those decisions, I don't think. I think that Bush was the perfect fall guy, the complete blank slate that all these dudes who were surrounding him could paint on. and get their world order, to be what it was. So the reason why we have a fondness for him right now is because now that he's out of the limelight and just retired into like being this regular dude, everybody goes, he's a pretty nice guy, man.
I mean, it is.
He never did any of those things. Cheney was doing those things. Rumsfeld would. I mean, whereas with this thing, it's
Trump.
This is Trump's world. Make no mistake about it. Every single thing that you're saying, from the southern border to the attack on climate, to like all the scientists that work in climate change have gotten pink slips, because they're trying to save the earth, which is like that's not part of my agenda. Every single attack that he's made on all of the things that make life worth living in a democracy are his soul being, emanating out of him. The real crime is that, the checks and balances, the guys who can save us from him, and there are many, are basically just like...
They're enabling it.
They're not only enabling it, but those are the ones that are going to hell as far as I'm concerned. The guys who are just sitting by going, no, there's nothing wrong here, folks. There's nothing to see here. It's okay that we abdicate all of our responsibility to the Constitution, to the American way, so that this guy can keep flagrantly packing our courts and flagrantly putting money in our pockets through corporate tax cuts. And it's what it is.
And I see what you're saying, Ron, because Trump is so personally and obviously cruel that it makes Bush, who was kind of like a goofball, seem more likable by comparison. Trump was a useful idiot used by people like Dick Cheney and John Bolton. But now Bolton's back.
Bush was, you mean?
I'm sorry, Bush was. Sorry, thank you for correcting me. But Trump is an idiot and cruel, whereas Bush was an idiot who was used by cruel guys like Dick Cheney. At the end of the day, though, the results are what matter, and they've both been hideous presidents.
I mean,
terrible
presidents. When you combine robber barons and slavers and Nazis into one guy, and that's our president, then there's nobody else to blame for that. I mean, we are watching, the representation of his soul, and it's black, it's dark, and it's in our faces every day, and it's really having an effect on.
It has an effect on our democracy, and it shows you how fragile it is, right? I mean, I think a lot of Americans are under the assumption that we have this strong democracy, but it's being dismantled quickly under this administration. It's incredibly fragile, and if you have an issue with someone who's really challenging constitutional rights, and you don't have the checks and balances in place, or you don't have the people who actually want to exercise those checks and balances, it dismantles democracy, dismantles everything that we're supposed to stand for. And we're seeing it happen right in front of our eyes. It's depressing.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.